So I just watched episode 1 of Daredevil Born Again and, well, you saw the title. I'm not saying it's bad, not even close, but man, they are trying way too hard to prove they're on the same level as the Netflix show, alright? The desperation is palpable. But you know, when you're truly desperate, you start to take risks, and that can lead to some really interesting things. There's some good stuff and a lot of weird stuff we gotta talk about. We're gonna discuss the plot and the big thing they did in a second, but first we need to talk about why it feels like they're doing too much. And it's in the editing, the cinematography, the background music, just the whole aesthetic they're constructing. If I could describe it in one word, it would be indulgent. They're basking in their own glory and constantly reminding you that they think this show is a big deal. Like at the start of the first episode, they have some pretty dramatic transitions and music, and that's cool at first, but the music definitely outstays its welcome.
Times indeed.
These Hell's Kitchen.
And there's a point where I'd rather just have silence so we can sit with those characters. And there are also sound effects and musical cues that are a little excessive. Visually, you can see it in the editing and camera work, going out of their way to have exotic shots that don't really add anything, zooming in and out when you could just stay still. It's too much. You're trying too hard. Actually, I can show you one scene that commits all 4 sins right here. And this is actually in the show.
Yes.
Is that really necessary? I feel like I'm watching an Indian drama. Okay, but seriously, just let the scene speak for itself. And the action sequence at the start, it's cool, but I don't know, it's just not hitting the same. Like there's a bit too much going on and parts of it feel sort of manufactured and over polished, and you can tell they're trying to emulate the previous show without really reaching that level. But I guess a lot of that is just the Marvel Studios coat of paint. So what do I mean by that? Well, just compare Matt talking to Fisk in this show versus Karen and Fisk in season 3. I'm not like a film student or anything, so I can't pinpoint why it feels so different. Like, I don't know, maybe the colors, the camera angles, the cutting back and forth, but just by comparison, this one's a little more impersonal, you know? Marvel Studios just has their own sort of style where they make all their movies feel kind of samey on purpose, and they spread to the shows in 2020 when they absorbed Marvel Television and switched to Disney Plus content. But even though they've recreated the TV division now, it's already kind of permeated into the content. And I already knew this would happen when I saw Echo. Just look at Fisk being brutal in that show and compare it to Fisk in the car door in Daredevil season 1. They're 2 scenes communicating the same thing with very different visual language. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, this is what Daredevil's gonna look like. Agatha is actually the only show that's truly been able to break away from the Marvel Studios coat of paint. Anyway, is this nitpicky? Yes, absolutely, but come on, these little things add up, even if you don't notice them, and make it feel a little overproduced. And the authenticity is the thing that drew people to the Netflix show in the first place. At some point, you gotta ask yourself, how much is too much? Because this episode definitely leans towards too much. The music, too much. The editing, too much. The opening, it's just way too... Okay. The opening is cool, I can't hate on the opening. But I just gotta say the last time they felt confident enough to have a whole long opening for a show was Secret Invasion. That's the only other time they've done that, so let's just say I'm holding my breath. But hey, at least it respects the original Netflix show, which might be more than we can say for the show itself. Yeah, let's touch on plot, because yes, they killed Foggy. I'm assuming you know that already if you clicked on this video. They killed my man Foggy in the first 10 minutes. Now this is very, very risky. Like obviously you risk angering and alienating fans of the original show because, man, you basically fridged him, but there are only 2 ways out of this. Number 1, you write a resultant character arc for Matt that is so awesome that we can't even be mad. Or number 2, you find a way to somehow bring him back without cheapening any of the consequences. Not to mention explaining how he somehow managed to survive. Like this isn't WandaVision. You can't just pull out like a white Foggy. These are both very difficult and challenging options, but they're the only options, and you better do one of them to satisfy the narrative because otherwise we're on an express route to Maria Hillville. They also immediately write out Karen, which is a shame because she's the best character in Daredevil, don't at me. And they use Bullseye like a disposable video game mini-boss. Now I'm assuming he's coming back later, but this actually reminds me of Gus Fring in Captain America Brave New World. They're both really cool, but barely there, just to set things into motion, which makes them feel underutilized, but it's okay if they come back. But if that's it for them, then yeah, that kind of sucks. And for Bullseye, that would disrespect the Netflix show. But it's just surprising. They pretty much threw away the original cast for their own Walmart versions. And this proto Jim Gordon is introduced in this weird way where it feels like we're supposed to know him, but he's a new character. But I think some people will assume they forgot him from Daredevil, or he was in some Disney Plus show they skipped, which is not true. It's just, I don't hate these new characters, but they are transparent and unnecessary replacements. We're so far removed now that I think you could literally watch this show without watching the old one. Obviously, you'd be missing out big time, but this is categorically not season 4 Vincent D'Onofrio. There's clearly still a ton of material from before they retooled. It's bizarrely drawing from the Netflix show while simultaneously trying too hard to surpass it. But overall, is Daredevil Born Again gonna be worth it? Maybe, probably. I know I've been pretty negative, but I do like it. It's too early to tell, but so far the plot is pretty interesting and befitting of these characters. If they're still going primarily by the pre-retooled story, then it might sound bad on paper, but I've been liking the interpersonal dramatic intrigue so far with just a sprinkle of action. Like, its politics are already somehow deeper than those of Captain America 4. And they're doing a lot of cool things, like they basically turned Matt into Batman, and the BB Report segment things, and the way they interlace Foggy's heartbeat into the fight scene, and they casually reference mystical stuff, and it seems like Matt's gonna do trials for various new and existing MCU characters throughout the show, which, by the way, is what She-Hulk should have been. But yeah, it is decidedly different, but I'm on board. I just need Foggy and Karen back, or at least Karen by the end of the season. If this is just a status quo going forward, then that's pretty disappointing. I'm gonna stop watching after season 1. But as long as there's a good story between Matt and Fisk, and they can justify Foggy's death, etc., then I think Born Again will comfortably sit at a level that's not quite with the original Netflix show, but still pretty good and a worthy successor in its own right. Also, they gotta stop trying so hard with the music and editing and stuff, but I think we're on track. You might have noticed that the moments I referred to were just from episode 1. Episode 2 is hopefully a much better indication of how the show will proceed, because they avoided the problem of doing too much anywhere, except the weird credits music. Okay, but seriously, you guys noticed it in episode 2, right? I'm not the only one that thought it was strange, abrupt, doesn't really fit Daredevil. Could have used his theme or something.